This month's Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique Land Rovers. Their showroom is located in Virginia, just 45 minutes west of Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their inventory of classic vehicles and follow them on Instagram at Commonwealth_Classics. Thank you, Commonwealth Classics, for your continued support of the podcast. The Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the Centresteer Podcast, podcast number 106 for January 2022. Centresteer is a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. I'm your host, John Costage. Joining me over Zoom, Harold and Morgan. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Dixon is not with us yet. Maybe he'll join mid-show. We don't know.
He has to thaw out the sky creeper.
Yes, it's
frozen to the ground.
It's frozen everywhere here, whereas all of us are in the Northeast, and currently it is, look, the temperature, it's 14 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, get out the t-shirts.
Yeah, downright balmy.
And Harold told us before we started recording the show that he was waiting for it to be 15 degrees so that he could then go back to the shop and work. And so that means that once it reaches 15 here, we have to stop the show.
Yep. Let's get going.
That's right. We got to roll. Our guest this month is Erick Huertas. Erick is a relatively new Land Rover owner, and he drove his Discovery 3 LR3 across America on the Transamerica Trail. He wrote about it in the February 2022 issue of Land Rover Owners International magazine, and he's on the podcast to tell us about his disco, the Transamerica Trail, and much more. He's a really good photographer. You want to go to Wondering Lottie on Instagram. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. Thank you for listening. If you are new to the podcast, welcome to the podcast. We talk about Land Rovers, new, old, capabilities, and the people who own and drive them, like Erick. An extra thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. We appreciate your support. Visit our website to see how you can support the podcast as a Patreon supporter. Or you can also buy a shirt, a sticker. You can buy us a tee, which is similar to Patreon, but you get to choose the amount. And continuing thanks to Bob for buying us brown water. This is your monthly reminder that 2023 is Land Rover's 75th anniversary, and we're inviting all Land Rover owners to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in July 2023, especially Series and Defender owners. You now have 17 months to prepare your Rover.
The clock is ticking.
You may have heard we're recording on January 29th, and yesterday was January 28th, of course, and you may have heard a bridge collapsed in the Pittsburgh area, actually in the city of Pittsburgh, in Frick Park, and that is a mile away from the Vintage Grand Prix site. So no one that I'm aware of was involved or hurt, but that will impact probably the Vintage Grand Prix to some degree. But that bridge is out. It's the main route we could take when Harold and I go to the Vintage Grand Prix. It's the road. It's on Forbes Avenue. Is a straight shot right into the main area of the Vintage Grand Prix International Car Day.
Thing to consider is that the route we normally take, which is Penn Avenue, will now be overloaded with all the traffic which has been displaced from Forbes.
Penn and Dallas, because we turn on Dallas to go right, which is the part of the detour now.
So I should point out at this point that it happened yesterday. It was almost exactly 36 years to the minute from the Space Shuttle Challenger incident.
Wow.
It's January 28th of 1986.
I think the bridge collapsed at 6:38. I think they said 6:40 in the morning. Yeah.
Maybe it was more like 9 or 10 in the morning when the Challenger, I can't remember. The sun was up. I know that much.
Part of the reason why the Challenger did explode was because there was some frozen.
Yes, it was frozen. Yeah.
I also heard that there was fortunately nobody was injured or badly injured as far as I know, but there was another potential bus incident with that bridge collapse, a much closer to a bigger fall than the sinkhole.
The memes are Pittsburgh, we eat buses for breakfast.
Yes.
About 2 years ago in downtown Pittsburgh, part of a road just collapsed. It had been all the piping and infrastructure underneath the road. A standard bus was going over it, and the back end just dropped into what became a sinkhole. So it was sticking out. Again, thankfully, no one was there was an injury, but no one was killed. And the same thing really happened with a bridge collapse in Frick Park, where the bus is upright. It's an accordion bus. It's one of those extended ones.
A bendy bus, as the British would say. The articulated motor coach.
And thankfully, I think part of the way the bridge collapsed and the way it kicked up, it held the bus from falling all the way back to the bottom of the ravine. Otherwise, it would probably have been a lot worse.
No, I think the rear module was lodged between sections of the bridge. However, the upshot of this is that there exists in the city of Pittsburgh a crane operator with experience at extracting subterranean buses.
And you may have heard, I think we all knew this, but just for the world now finds out that Pittsburgh is called the city of bridges because it has more bridges than anywhere else in the world, including Venice. Something like 438 bridges. And I saw on Wikipedia page for Pittsburgh, someone had taken a screen cap and crossed out 483 and wrote 482 or whatever the number was.
Of course.
Which was kind of...
That sounds like a t-shirt opportunity. Countdown of bridges.
The bus that went into the sinkhole, I turned that into a holiday tree ornament. So I suspect we'll get the same for this bus.
Well, and there were plenty of Halloween costumes for the sinkhole bus.
Someone did. You're right. The sinkhole bus, someone made their own. Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Would it take two people to have the costume for this one?
Yeah.
And we received an email this month from a listener, Martin, in the UK. I'll cut to the chase because I think this is the best bit, and then we'll go back and read you some of the email. So I've seen the first Land Rover at Gaydon, and now the last Defender. Bucket item list checked off. I'll read you some of his email here. He said, John and the team, thought you'd like to know I was driving by my local dealer in the weekend, spotted some classic Defenders in the lot in the showroom. Getting a closer look, I spotted one in Cheswick Green. The number plate looked familiar, H1666HUE. Sure enough, that was the last Defender. He says it must be on a UK tour. He said it's mint, still has the new car smell. Interestingly, it is not road registered, so the registration number is a bit of a dummy, so at least I haven't, or at least it hasn't been applied to this vehicle. He didn't spend too long looking at it, but he did notice it did have short wheel studs. So with the wolf wheels on the nuts, didn't have enough threads showing.
So it's authentic.
It is. Even down to the last, that's all they had in the bid,
Even
right?
to the last questionable MOT item that everybody deals with.
There was a Series 3 next to it, and he said his daughter loved the as new Series 3, and he same as his first Land Rover. And he said, keep up the good work. So thanks for that, Martin. And we had a little conversation, and Martin said he did also took a picture of the VIN, and he verified that is in fact the correct VIN number for the very last Land Rover rolling off the assembly line.
He might have a way to check that and verify that VIN.
He used the resource that is a Land Rover LR workshop. That's where he checked that information. Thanks, Martin, for listening, and thanks for your email. Maybe for the 75th anniversary, they'll send the last Defender to North America, and we can see it. Well, speaking of the 75th anniversary of Land Rover in 2023, there is work afoot to renew ANARC, which is the Association of North American Rover Clubs, to have events throughout North America. There's clubs here, especially in the Northeast. I was hoping Dixon would join us so he could talk a little more about it, because I know OVLR is part of that, and so is Rove out of Virginia, beginning discussions about bringing ANARC back in order to have and as I said, an event or events for the Land Rover's 75th anniversary next year. So that work is afoot.
Sounds like a guest opportunity in a future episode. Get Dave and Dixon to talk about it.
They've started an exploratory committee to figure that out. And so though Dave and Dixon, I think, are not part of the exploratory committee. When things get a little more firm, yeah, definitely. The podcast was invited to help promote and to communicate that information out to hear folks in North America.
That would imply that a few people listen to us. All
right, let's get into the news. First up, JLR sales slip 1% in 2021 on weakened Jaguar demand. JLR sales dropped 1.2% in 2021 on reduced deliveries of Jaguar cars and a shortage of semiconductors. JLR sold 420,856 vehicles last year, and the Land Rover brand posting 334,000, which is up 3.4%. Jaguar Mark was down 16% to 86,000 units. Semiconductor shortages hit the company hard in the final quarter of the year, with sales down 14% to 80,000 units. JLR struggled to fulfill orders last year, especially for the newest models. It said that back orders for all models were 154,000, with 36,000 for the Defender, 30,000 for the latest generation Range Rover. That's the new full-size one. JLR has been focusing on higher margin models for the chips available, which has hurt sales of the Jaguar brand. Quote, "We target chips to the right car," unquote. Chief Financial Officer Adrian Mardell told investors on a call in November. He said that the average gross vehicle revenue was much higher in the third quarter, calendar quarter, than in previous quarters for that reason. They say supply began to improve in the final 3 months of 2021, facilitating a 91.8% uptick in wholesale volumes for the Range Rover, 64% for the Range Rover Sport, and 34.5% for the Jaguar I-Pace. Land Rover sold more than 3 times as many cars in 2021 than Sibling brand, reporting a 3.4% rise, led over Jaguar. Led by demand for the Range Rover Vogue, which sold 63,398 units, while the Defender was close behind at 63,134 units. The Range Rover Sport, even in its 8th year on sale, was a strong contributor with 57,000 units, while its full-size sibling, the latest version, which came out in the last quarter, achieved 43,000 sales. Land Rover sold 54,000 Discovery Sports, 35,000 Velars, and 18,000 Discoveries. There's your sales for last quarter last year.
So I may have missed something, but does that mean the Disco is by a large margin the poorest seller?
Yeah, very large margin.
Interesting.
It is half of what the Defender is. No, I'm sorry, more than half. Defender sold 63,000 units, 18,000 for the Discovery. What's that? 20, that's like a third, right?
So on a global scale, the Discovery is becoming what the Freelander was here in the U.S.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see the Evoque sell more than the Defender, admittedly by just 200 units, but still the Evoque had sold more than the Defender did.
I wonder if that has to do with the ability to produce them.
I mean, they are putting the chips to where they're getting the most money, so it's very possible.
Yeah, and the Defender has a lot more chips in it than previous models, so it's likely that the Evoque has far fewer chips.
One might say the Defender has too many.
Yes.
They're probably happy that maybe Discovery is not selling as well, because then they can put all those chips into the models that are selling well. They probably haven't been pushing the Disco maybe as much. I'm guessing. I'm not sure, but it's just a thought. All right, moving on to JLR owners owe a debt of gratitude to Mike Cross. And this is from Auto Express. I'm going to read the whole thing because it's relevant to our interests, and it's not too long. We're always excited to buy cars at Auto Express, but this week comes a reminder that every vehicle that we enjoy driving is made, designed, and developed by people, because the exciting news that Matt Becker, formerly of Aston Martin and Lotus, is on his way to JLR is accompanied by the sad confirmation that Mike Cross, the British brand's director of vehicle targets and sign-off, is retiring. Crossy, as he is known in the industry, joined Land Rover back in 1978 as a development engineer. He racked up a total of 36 years working on JLR products, honing them over thousands of miles on his favorite roads, usually in the UK. We can't divulge the precise locations, but North Wales and stretches of the Fosse Way were regular haunts. Mike has also spent many hours with journalists, including those at this title, sharing his views on vehicles as they went through the final sign-off. COVID-19 has interrupted such activities, but I can remember a frank, honest conversation on the last occasion I attended where Mike revealed the challenges of making the then forthcoming new Defender not too polished, lest it not feel authentic enough for the enthusiast. It was yet more proof that despite being a man who could flick most cars sideways at a moment's notice, his focus always remained fixed on what the eventual owner of the vehicle would feel from behind the wheel during everyday driving. Ultimately, of course, he nailed the Defender's compromise between handling and ride, as he did on so many Jaguar and Land Rovers, forcing countless rivals to up their game in this area as well. Auto Express owes a huge debt of gratitude to Mike for his candor and generosity with his time over the years, but it's hundreds of thousands of owners who enjoy the way the XE handles or how the Evoque soaks up bumps in town who really benefit from his skills the most.
Given his function within the company, I wonder if he had a hand in selecting the development camo for each thing he tested, since he probably never drove anything that didn't have it.
They have him with a picture in front of a red Jaguar XE.
Staged, obviously.
That's right. Maybe it was his going away retirement gift. Here, have a car.
Oh, that's a nice alternative to a gold watch.
So thanks to Mike Cross for and congratulations on his retirement. Sounds like a really cool job, actually. That would be fun.
Oh yeah, it'd be fun.
Land Rover is hiring in the UK, and the reason I'm mentioning that is because what the Coventry Live mentioned in the article, I think, is informative of what the company thinks when they're trying to hire people, and so that informs the company's mission, vision, and values, as they like to call it. JLR has a lot of roles waiting for people to apply for at the minute, and maybe if you're in the UK and you want to work for them, you can go out and check their openings, or if you want to move there, I guess.
I'm guessing chief of design is not available.
They have a short list here. Was nothing IT related, unfortunately, because I would have maybe attempted. But they have lead engineer, engine analyst, major casting TMA lead analyst, an HV charger engineer, project engineer, functional safety engineer for assisted and automated driving.
Destructive testing specialist, maybe?
But the article here says the new Jlr Global Strategy sees, quote, sustainability-rich reimagination of modern luxury, unique customer experiences, and positive societal impact, according to its website. Quote, our schemes are aimed at people who have a passion for learning and a passion for pioneering, ambitious, innovative, and determined people who respect our heritage and think beyond the challenges of today to build cars of tomorrow, unquote. It was nice to see that they had respect our heritage in there. I thought that was one good thing I did like.
Hopefully it's more than just words.
Next up is Hot Cars has an article of what you need to know before buying a Jaguar or Land Rover. And there's just one part I wanted to read from this, which is how much do Jaguar Land Rover repairs cost? Because they did a comparison here.
Well, if you have to ask.
Repair Pal given the Range Rover 2 out of 5 stars for reliability, half a star less than the average luxury SUV. Making this even worse, the average repair cost is over $1,200, twice that of the average car and more than most luxury SUVs. Their repair specialist continues to say that the model usually has to visit the garage for an unscheduled service 0.6 times a year. This is 0.2 times more frequently than most cars. It is good news here for Range Rover owners. The average luxury SUV has to visit 0.7 times a year. There's also a 19% chance that the repair is severe, which is in line with its competition. By comparison, Jaguar's F-Pace model fares considerably better. The average repair bill drops to $807, and the likelihood of a repair being severe is down to 11% from 19%. It is the same story for the Jaguar XF, the company's midsize saloon, which averages a repair bill of $1,066 and the likelihood of severe repair to only 12%. This trend continues with the brand's flagship F-Type model, which has an average repair bill of $739. So there's a little comparison there on repairs to give you a sense of things and how it fits together.
Since the Jaguars are generally smaller vehicles and certainly usually not quite as complex as the Defender, the Land Rovers, I would imagine
there would be one less gearbox to leak.
For sure.
And perhaps Jag has figured out a way to change the oil without having to lift the body off the frame.
Well, Jaguar also has the I-Pace, which hopefully doesn't leak any oil.
But it leaks a few electrons, though.
I bet it does.
Next, a Land Rover Defender 130 patent images show for the premium Explorer of the lineup. And nothing specific really new, except based on these drawings. The patent line drawings remove almost all of the suspense about what's coming, if any suspense remained. The only difference that we spot in the drawings compared to the 110 and the 90 is a tweaked fender vent. The vents on the two smaller models are all black mesh, whereas there's a decorative element contained in the vents of the 130. The camouflage truck did without these vents, so we'll see what arrives at launch. But everything else they indicate here was what we kind of already knew, but the patents had been unfortunately revealed, or fortunately, depending on how you look at things.
Well, when all else fails, you can always count on the government to leak the vague images once they hit the patent office.
And then Harry's Garage, which if you're not following that channel, I highly recommend you do. He did a 26-minute review of the Defender 90 hardtop that he's been using on his farm. And it's a It is a close as I've ever seen to a real world review. We considered showing the 26-minute video and then just talking about it as we went on the podcast, but I think we'll not do that. We'll let you watch it yourself. But I highly recommend it to watch. You can see, he uses it on the farm. He shows some damage that's been done to it. It's really interesting to see it used in everyday use. I like, that he did some towing, so you got to see some how the towing operates and how well he did that, and how the backup camera, and which is really interesting to see. So if you're thinking about buying a 90, especially, it's probably worth your time. I think you put 5,000 miles on it. It's the commercial version. Should maybe throw that out too.
Oh, so in other words, the only cool version.
Yeah. YouTube description here: Land Rover Defender 90 D200. So it's also the diesel commercial hardtop 5,000 mile review. I've had this Defender commercial for 4 months now and tested in all conditions, including motorways, farm, run, about, and towing a 6-wheel car transporter, often loaded close to 3.5 tons. He actually towed a Jaguar. He had to take a Jaguar to get serviced.
Got to say, if I had to own a new Defender, that would be the one.
Same. Yeah, it's too bad that that's not coming over here.
Well, that's part of the reason, but that would be the only one I would seriously consider.
Now, the only problem is that he had issues getting things in getting in the back of the Defender, because there's that partition, and then the way the door closes, it's difficult to put items in there. Even like he gets a rake out, and the rake has to stick out, and you can't close the door.
But for long items, I have a real Defender for that. This is just the grocery getter. I wouldn't expect to do any actual work with it, but for running around, if I had to have one, this would be the one I would have.
Tested the 2021 Land Rover Discovery P3360 R Dynamic, highlights a sibling rivalry. This is from Car and Driver. The Discovery spearheaded the return of the Land Rover to the United States market, making a name for itself with its rugged go just about anywhere capability. Now in its 4th generation, Discovery now has a somewhat different mission and must make its case as the brand's family hauler. Even so, the Discovery's DNA still includes more off-road capability than other of its ilk, even if the new Defender now wears the brand's mud-plugging crown. That's the opening paragraph. I'm not going to read the whole article, give you the highs, and I'm going to read the final paragraph. Highs: genuine off-road ability, placid ride, robust towing capacity. And on the lows, luggage space disappears with all seats in use, body lean readily in cornering, and innocuous styling. I would definitely agree with the styling. And the final paragraph here: compared to other 3-row family haulers, the Discovery still has impressive off-road prowess, but it's traded that image for a more urbane persona. As a result, it's somewhat overshadowed by its rugged, handsome siblings inside the Land Rover showroom. Granted, the Defender's interior is not quite as plush, and its optional 3rd row is even less accommodating, but it brings a more authentic safari vibe to the school pickup line than the latest Disco can't match. So if you're in the market for buying a new either Disco or Defender, this might be a good article to look at.
You really want that vibe while you're sitting in the pickup line at school. What you really need is an FC 101.
Bollinger Motors pumps brakes on consumer EVs to focus on commercial trucks. And you did hear a sigh from Harold.
Yeah,
We'll get to that
it was
in just a
a
second.
sad day when I read that article.
Bollinger has announced the postponement to its consumer truck production and delivery, referring to the B1 and the B2, in order to focus on the commercial vehicle business. As such, Bollinger will refund deposits placed by customers for reservations on the B1 and B2 electric trucks. In October 2019, pricing trucks was announced a starting price of $125,000 US. The announcement comes at a time when the electric commercial vehicle market, particularly delivery vans, is rapidly heating up. Rivian is expected to provide investor Amazon with a fleet of 100,000 electric delivery vans, while GM's BrightDrop has received substantial orders from FedEx and Walmart. UPS plans to use Arrival's electric trucks in the US and Europe. There are many more electric delivery van and commercial plans in the works from a variety of manufacturers and logistics companies.
It's disappointing. I mean, I understand it because I think their big issue was there was competition in that sector for like half the money. They couldn't build it cheap enough. But I mean, I'm disappointed because I was looking forward to somebody. I mean, I can't be me. I can't afford it. But I really wanted to see somebody drop both the front and rear tailgate and haul 24-foot sticks of steel. Right. Just because they can.
It's disappointing, but it's also, I think, the smart move. That seems to be where the money is going to be. And you can get those orders now. You already have people able to buy them, Amazon.
Right. It makes sense. And once Ford enters that market, it was, the limited niche guys are in serious trouble.
Yeah. The Ford F-150 electric is like sold out.
Yeah. It's like what, $40,000 of that. It's as cheap as a gas car.
Yeah.
Speaking of Land Rover rivals, the Ineos Grenadier is coming in 2022. One of the most eagerly awaited rivals in the automotive industry is coming in 2022 in the shape of the Ineos Grenadier. Often billed as a rival to the Defender, in reality, the Grenadier is more about keeping the spirit of the old Land Rover Defender alive. The Grenadier has been some time in development, and its delivery is a little behind schedule, but production is set to start in July this year. That's 2022. It was originally going to be built in a new factory in Wales, with part of the production process taking place in Portugal, but the company instead took the opportunity to buy an old Mercedes-Benz factory on the French-German border. The Grenadier will be powered by a BMW engine, and prices will start around £48,000. And then someone took a Range Rover Classic in Australia, a 1992 Range Rover Vogue, and it gets the silent treatment. They electrified it.
I was going to say they just disconnected the battery. It's silent now. Doesn't move, but it's silent.
Well, no, not if you push it, it moves.
Well, yeah, and actually it's probably not really silent because you can still probably hear the rust falling off of it if you listen carefully enough.
The car's owner chose Australia's Evolution Electric Car Cafe to freshen up the old Range Rover for the 21st century. Before rushing haphazardly into the build, they worked together to set out an engineering plan. Once they laid out their ideas and established a 100 to 200 kilometer range goal, it was time to get to work. And you can, dear listener, if you want to know more, feel free to read the article. It's pretty interesting about what they did and the results there. So that's happened. I think you'll see more of that coming.
Yeah, I think the electric conversions are very interesting. I especially like seeing how they approach, originality in them, maintaining the original structure and functionality and stuff like that. Yeah, it's fun to look at those, but we'll have to see what happens in the long run.
Well, I mean, the big issue is where do you put all the batteries without intruding upon the space, which really makes it what it is.
Seems to me that the Land Rovers are good for that, especially Defenders with the ladder frame, that you could put the batteries down low and kind of protect them and then not intrude into the space, since you do have the.
The question is whether you can get enough batteries in that space.
Right.
Fair enough.
And you generally, with the Defenders, you have a fair amount of drivetrain components in between the ladder frame,
unless you're replacing the axles with electric motor axles or something.
Right. If you do like motors per axle, or in wheel motors, in hub motors,
right. Then you've got all that engine bay and transmission tunnels with which to stack batteries.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess there's two conversions you could do. You could completely replace the drivetrain, or you can kind of like hybrid into the drivetrain, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, either you replace and put motors in the axle and do custom axle stuff and rip out the entire drivetrain, or you just pull the engine and put a motor in front of the transmission.
Yeah.
Those are your options.
Guessing here, what easier thing would be put a motor in front of the transmission?
People have been doing that for a long time in a number of vehicles. In fact, I've seen several series trucks with that conversion.
And next, the Australian Army Land Rover Perentie, the toughest Land Rover ever made. We've certainly talked about it before on the podcast.
And perhaps the largest Land Rover ever made.
Article is kind of a primer on them. We just read a couple of the facts here about it. The Land Rover Perentie is probably the toughest and Land Rover ever made. A few thousand were built for the Australian Defence Force, and they were deployed in both peacekeeping and military roles in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia over 3 decades. Although the Perentie looks not that different to the standard two-door 110 long wheelbase Land Rover, it has been significantly modified. Power is now provided by bulletproof Isuzu 3.9-liter diesel truck engine, and it has heavy-duty chassis that's so strong the entire vehicle can be transported by helicopter with a tether to just one corner.
The article mentions that they look just like a 110, unless you get one of the 400 6-wheel Perentes, which are very different because they are 8 inches wider and 8 inches taller.
Taller? Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't
the
realize
cab is taller. There's more headroom. Literally the only Land Rover sheet metal left on the 6-wheel Perentie are the front wings and the doors.
Not even the bonnet?
It's 8 inches wider.
Oh, right. Oh,
because all the width is in the engine bay. So they've made a fiberglass bonnet, which is wider and yet a lot heavier than the metal one that it replaces, oddly enough. You'd think fiberglass would be lighter, but no. Any chance to make it heavier, and the Aussies went for it. The grill surround that gets in front of the radiator is fiberglass molding because it's 8 inches wider. Uses a stock grill, but there's lots of space on either side of it. The bulkhead is made of cast iron that's been galvanized.
Oof.
Probably sheet metal, but it feels like cast iron. It's incredibly thick, incredibly heavy. It's galvanized. The roof and cab sections are made of steel and galvanized. The chassis is made of square tube. It's custom chassis. It's galvanized. So they like their galvanizing in a place where rust never happens, which is kind of amusing.
Beach driving.
The result is that this thing is just incredibly heavy. And so I happen to have wheel drive ambulance in my possession right now. They made 400 of these 6-wheel Perentes and 95 of the ambulance box, which is the biggest and heaviest of the 6 wheels. This thing weighs in at over 10,000 pounds.
What? No.
Wow.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. No wonder you need that Isuzu engine.
It is over 9 feet tall. It got dropped off dead stick in my driveway because it needs an engine. Maxed out the winch on my disco, just trying to drag it up my driveway into the shop.
Oof.
Yeah, it's a beast.
A couple other fast facts here. You can read the article to learn more, or just listen to Harold because Harold knows a lot here. But this says in 1983, the Australian Army put a tender for a new series of 1 and 2 ton 4x4 and 6x6 vehicles that would be able to fulfill a variety of roles from reconnaissance, troop transport to ambulance and radio communications. The name Perentie comes from the lizard species Varanus gigantus, the largest guana lizard native to Australia.
3rd largest lizard on the planet.
And each Perentie started life as a 2-door long wheelbase Land Rover 110. Most are soft tops in military camouflage.
The amusing thing is the 6-wheel drives are considered 110s. They still have a sticker on the front that says 110, but the wheelbase, if you actually measure it, is either 120 or 150, depending on which of the rear axles you measure to.
So maybe this should be like the 110A.
Technically, when you talk about wheelbase in a multi-axle type thing, you go to the center line of 2 rears, so it would be 135.
And I think we should maybe throw a W on the end of 135W.
135 Maximus.
Gigantus. It would fit in with the Perentie name.
I just call it the Hulk lizard and leave it at that.
And now we have a series of real world Land Rover driver. We couldn't come up with a segment name for this, but there's 3 of these things where people were driving their Land Rovers and did something stupid.
Important mishaps.
Okay, let's go with that. Important mishaps. First up, the Land Rover Discovery Sport spectacularly flips over after running into a Toyota Yaris in a roundabout. The Land Rover driver, it seems they thought about neither as they drove into the back of a Toyota GR Yaris and rolled over. The incident occurred in Birmingham, England, more specifically at the Robin Hood Island roundabout. It shows the Discovery Sport entering the roundabout fairly normally, even courteously, in letting a Nissan Juke pass by before they got into the middle lane. The Land Rover's driver then cut to the side, inside most lane, likely to bypass the traffic and the other 2. However, the SUV was fully in the lane before the driver got on the gas, and they ended up getting a lesson in patience.
So if the disco rolled over, what happened to the Yaris?
It's fine. There doesn't appear to be any damage. It hit the rear fender on the right-hand side of the Yaris. It's fine.
Yaris was small enough. It just got punted out of the way like a hockey puck.
No, it was stationary. The Yaris had a brake on, was stationary. The Defender was trying to get into the right-hand lane, and the Disco Sport, and he started to accelerate and just hit the back, and it popped up the vehicle, and then it went up over the Yaris and then rolled.
Oh, so like a Chips episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
No Chips episode complete without a vehicle catching a corner and flipping the air and rolling over.
And if you haven't seen the video, there's have links, of course, in the show notes. You can see the whole thing because if someone had a dash cam behind them, and you get to see the whole thing. It rolled over on its roof.
And to be fair, the GR Yaris is sort of like a wedge compared to the
Not in the back.
Disco.
Not in the back. It's like straight up and down there.
It's still a much smaller vehicle than the Range Rover Sport.
I just think it's physics. It began to accelerate. It popped up, and then I think it kind of rolled over the top of the back of the Yaris.
Oh, totally.
Next up, Land Rover towing 20-foot trailer pulled over for doing 30 miles an hour on the A47. A Land Rover towing a 20-foot shipping container was pulled over on the A47 after it struggled to hit speed limits. The Norfolk and Suffolk Roads and Armed Policing Team spotted the slow-moving vehicle traveling in poor weather conditions on the A47 Norwich bypass on Saturday, January 8th. On closer inspection, it was discovered that the vehicle was a small Land Rover. It's the pickup version of a Defender. Was towing a triaxle flatbed trailer with a 20-foot container of the kind usually transported by lorries. It's a shipping container strapped on top. In a tweet, the spokesman for the Norfolk and Southern Roads and Policing Team, we all know this is a lorry driver shortage, or there is a lorry driver shortage, but not sure this is the best way to adapt. The vehicle was barely able to reach 30 miles an hour on the A47 in Norwich. The vehicle also had defective lights and unsuitable mirrors.
So it's a Land Rover. I'm impressed that he got it up to 30, to be honest.
Yeah.
I want to know what was in the shipping container.
Probably all the parts to fix the truck that was towing it.
Oh, right.
Now, I love that they enforce the minimum speed limit during inclement weather.
Good point.
I think they just had found something in the book. What's the problem here? You weren't going fast enough?
Well, I mean, yeah, they can't write him a ticket for being an idiot. There's not enough statute there. But.
And finally, why can't this Range Rover Sport go up a snowy hill? The Range Rover Sport is a very capable off-roader, but this video shows one getting defeated by a snowy hill somewhere in Europe. Initially, the Range Rover Sport can be seen heading up the hill, seemingly without issue. However, as it continues, it begins to slow down until it grinds to a halt. Unable to put its power to the ground, this despite the fact that it was apparently fitted with winter tires from Michelin. The driver can be seen reversing back down the hill, trying to get up the snowy hill for a second time, but once again, the SUV was left spinning its wheels. Ultimately, the driver is forced to give up and admit defeat.
Didn't a similar thing happen at a ski resort in Vermont a couple of years ago?
After a few drinks, yeah.
Well, there was no mention of whether alcohol was involved with this one, but
True. I'm not so sure how the European Michelin snow tires are actually rated, but also whether the driver actually used any of the appropriate modes to actually try to attempt the hill climb.
Or knew what they were doing.
Right.
Because at least, when you watch the video, it looks like they I think it seems like maybe they backed up off the accelerator when it didn't catch for a second, and then it kind of backed off. It seems like it stopped then. And there was either ice underneath of it, or they turned the slushy snow to ice or a very slick surface anyways, and then that caused problems. And I'm not so sure they even had winter tires on. Yeah, they at least they didn't look knobby. They kind of look like they were all seasons, but it's tough to tell in that video.
Well, but all seasons can be snow rated. Doesn't mean they're any good, but
it's a valid
True.
point. Maybe that's a valid point. Snow rated versus being true winter tires, which are usually what, mud and snow.
Well, a lot of tires that say mud and snow aren't really even suitable for winter, even though they have that in their name. If they don't have that little mountain peak and snowflake thing in the sidewall, they're really just not good.
And even those that do have that may not use the appropriate or the best rubber compounds to actually deal with winter snow.
So we talk about these because they're out there. We're not shaming anybody, but we're just talking about them because they're relevant to our interests.
And happen to be, appropriate for this season in our region.
Right.
Finally, really interesting to find this. This is pretty cool, and I recommend you go out and watch this. This is a 31-minute instructional film created by Land Rover UK for the British Ministry of Defence to teach new recruits how to drive Land Rovers both on and off-road in a wide variety of conditions. It appears this was made in the 90s, we were thinking, and it's like 31 minutes, and it shows Ministry of Defense soldiers how to use their new Defender.
Was there a section on how to drive properly whilst being shot upon?
No. This is basically normal activities like backing up, towing, some off-roading, wading through water, going through the city streets, and making sure you go the appropriate speed, don't go too fast, be able to stop. Child might jet out from the side of the road, or a car might back out of a parking space. So kind of basic things. It sounds like they were getting the new Defender was being introduced into the military, and folks were used to Series 3s, I'm guessing. And so this was a complete change in how to do things.
So they probably just wanted to do a defensive driving class, basically.
Yeah.
You might learn something from doing this, or remind you of things to do. Don't put your thumbs inside the steering wheel, and you use the engine to brake. So those kinds of activities, and maybe if you're new or even experienced off-roader, it still might give you some tips. It's still kind of interesting and worth.
It's probably a hoot to watch anyway, just for the vintage aspect of it.
Yeah, they do show a Defender doing off-roading the wrong way by bouncing up and down. It's I want to know, was that done intentionally, or where did they find that video?
They give the new recruit the vehicle and say, "Hey, just drive it that way." Okay. Now everybody, that was the way not to do it.
or perhaps, just some of those guys in World War II with the Jeep with the cannon behind, that they had all 6 wheels airborne.
Yes.
Right.
This is very similar, because they have a machine gun mounted on top of the Defender, and they go through these muddy moguls, and the thing, does the bounce up and down.
With the gunner in position?
No, there's a passenger and a driver, and there's no gunner.
I do not want to be that guy trying to hold on to the 50 cal while we're bouncing around.
No, you don't.
And certainly don't want to try to actually be firing the thing at the time.
Well, yeah, there wouldn't be any accuracy involved. There's some certain for that.
I have a link in the show notes to the article, which has information you may find interesting, listener, and then go check out that video. It's highly enjoyable, but it's also good club viewing fodder.
There you go. That's good club night stuff. I wonder if there's any other military Land Rover videos out there. I know there's a lot of really interesting manuals from back in the series truck day that would lend themselves well to videos. I have the Ministry of Defense manual on how to abandon your vehicle, and in a way that you cannot make use of any of the technology you leave behind.
Oh.
How to destroy this, how to destroy that. It's quite fun to read. How many rounds need to be fired into this component?
I'm sure there's probably, YouTube's a good place to look for some of those things too.
Yeah, and there's certainly lots of, Land Rover and, British Leyland as well, videos of the series Land Rover, various training videos and stuff like that, which are interesting and available on YouTube, but there's not as many of the military or the Defender ones. But this particular one is pretty interesting.
Well, with the 75th anniversary coming up next year, I suspect you might see more of these things being surfaced as people want to celebrate and bring out the mark. And then as the Defender heritage version is no longer really, is probably be replaced or is in use as much, those things may become available to us to watch.
What I'd really like to see become available again, at least on YouTube, is a high definition version of the iconic Richard Hammond video, which apparently just disappeared after the incident at BBC. When the show got canceled, it seems like all those cool videos got pulled, including the iconic Hammond video, which I reference many times.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I've seen a few really grainy, low quality copies, but the good one is gone.
And on that bombshell, there's your Top Gear reference. That's the news for January 2022. And now on the Centresteer podcast, welcome Erick Huertas, who is a Pacific Northwest resident in the United States of America, and he is a Disco 3 owner. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you here. I've been following you on Instagram for these number months, maybe years now. I can't remember. You take outstanding, excellent photographs, and not just of Land Rover stuff, by the way.
Thank you. Much appreciated. It's been a good journey so far.
Yes. Are you a professional photographer?
So not quite. We're on my way there. So I'm in University of Washington's professional photography program right now, among other things. So that's definitely helped me dial everything in.
Gotcha. And the reason you're here is because you're in the current issue, the February 2022 issue of Land Rover Owners International, because you took a Transamerica trip in your Discovery 3.
Correct. Yep. In June to, in reality, May through July of this past year, 2021, I did Sam Carrero's Transamerica Trail, coast to coast. Ended up was on for about 86 days on the trail, driving about 13,000 miles. So it was a good time.
Did you go alone?
For the most part, yeah. I ended up getting a partner about halfway through.
Sure.
But for the most part, the first month and a half was just me.
Well, before we get to the more of the Transamerica journey, let's find out more about how you got into Land Rovers. Is this Disco 3 your first or only Land Rover?
Yes. So it is my first and only Land Rover. So essentially,
I was slow down. Only you didn't get the bug.
Oh, I have the bug. Don't worry. My salary is what prevents me from owning significantly more. Don't worry.
Understood. Yes.
So I was stationed up in our boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, and I didn't have my car at the time. So I started just perusing, looking for something that would get through that Midwest winter. And then I thought I was going to get a Tacoma or some sort of Toyota or something, or just find something used to get me through. And I came across this LR3 that looked to be in pretty decent shape. And then I started looking into it a little bit more. I finally decided to go and see it. And the guy wanted absolutely nothing for it because the air compressor was starting to go on the suspension. Right. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't have anything to do while I'm here anyway. So might as well have a little project. So I ended up picking it up for about $3,500. And then about a month later, I was addicted to Land Rover. So,
it took that long.
Yeah. I'm not super mechanically inclined,
sure.
But it kind of phased into itself with everything, right. Me trying to figure out how to drive it and how to fix everything those first couple of months.
So what year, color, and trim level?
It is the 2008 SE. It is the greenish gray. I don't know the official name for the color. And I'm a little colorblind, so sometimes it looks gray, sometimes it looks green to me.
Right.
So close enough.
A good looking vehicle. What modifications have you made to it?
So the big things I've done so far is I ended up pulling the airbag suspension, and I put an old man emo heavy duty coil suspension in it. And I put the Terra Firma raised air intake on the side. Recently, before my last trip that I just finished here about a week ago, from Washington down to Key West, I stripped all the rear seats out and I built a bed platform over it. So that was good modification.
Did you do that of your own design, or did you find something online?
Yep, it was. I found something on the forums in Australia originally, but the measurements weren't working out, probably because it's my own fault that I can't convert metric to imperial. But I'll pretend that that's not real, and I figured it out all by myself.
No one else has ever done that before, by the way. You're the only one.
Indeed.
So it's an 08. How many miles did you have on it, or do you have on it now? However.
Yep, I bought it September of 2020 with 143K on it. Okay. And I just rounded 185 about 4 days ago.
Oh, sweet.
So
V6, yeah, that's the V6.
V8.
It's a V8. Okay. I forget which way they broke those down, the V6 and the V8 and all that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. And for listeners who are wondering, I will use Disco 3, even though in America it's called the LR3, just because that's what it should have been called.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Just like the LR4 should have been the Discovery 4.
Agreed.
Thankfully, they've gone back, and now the Disco 5 is now back in America called the Discovery. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dixon in Canada, was it the LR3 and 4?
Yes, it was.
Okay, they didn't.
It was.
I was curious. Never always wondered about that. In Canada, if it was stuck with Discovery or LR.
No, JLR is effectively run out of Mahwah in New Jersey.
Right. Oh, that's right. North America, Land Rover North America. Right. So before you got into Land Rovers, were you an off-roader or an adventure person? Did you have like a Toyota or, I don't know, an S10 or something like that?
So I had a Honda, my first car before that, which was my first car. I had a Honda CRV. So nothing too crazy.
Sure.
And it was just enough to do things that I wanted it to do, but I really wasn't into adventuring in a vehicle base at all. I would always go on road trips, but majority for me, it was backpacking and climbing and that sort of thing. I really got the overlanding bug, if you will, when I PCS'd I was stationed in Bethesda, Maryland at the time, and I PCS'd over to the West Coast, and I packed up everything in my little Honda CRV with an overweight trailer, destroyed the suspension along the way.
Oh, wow.
Then, yeah,
Wow.
but commuted west and stopped at all the national parks that I always wanted to visit and everything through the trip. And I was just like, this is kind of cool. We didn't cover a lot of ground with this. And that's when I started getting the bug and started looking at upgrading a vehicle. And that's kind of where the overlanding and off-roading thing really began to start for me.
You took a CRV with a trailer through the Rocky Mountains?
Yeah, highly do not recommend.
I'm shocked that you made it to the other coast.
Yeah, so am I. So I was going over Independence Pass on 70 in Colorado, and after I got to the peak, I was coming down, and I call it a freak snowstorm, but in actuality, just a very common snowstorm for the area,
right,
was just coming down, and I was slipping and sliding, and the tractor trailers were going faster than me, and I was like, all right, yep. I'm going to die today. This is going to be good times.
This is when I go. Yes. And this is how it's going to be.
Yep. Yeah, it was bound to happen. I'm surprised I lived. And it was definitely realized I needed something a little beefier from then on out.
I think we all have those stories from when we were younger. Mine was a 1979 Oldsmobile Cutlass. And I just, I had to go to State College. And I arrived in State College, and it wasn't a bad snowstorm. It was just a little bit of snow, but it was enough that I had like about an inch of ice on all four leading edges of that vehicle.
Fantastic.
And I would have had all seasons on there, and I'm like, I don't know how I made it there, and without any foreseeable problems. I have no clue to this day.
For sure.
You survive, and then you go, you know what? Winter tires. There's a reason why they have those.
There is. They're very, very beneficial to have. Surprise.
Yes. How did you know about Land Rovers before you got your disco? Did you have any memories of that? Were you watching Wild Kingdom, anything of that nature?
So I always knew, well, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I always just remembered looking at photos of like the Disco 1 and Disco 2s on Safari and everything like that. And I always had like an infatuation with them. I just knew nothing about them. And when I started looking more and more into it, and when I was about to buy my disco for the first time, everybody was trying to sway me away. Like, no, they're riddled with problems. It's not worth it. But I was just like, oh, but it looks so cool. And it just was like a spiritual calling, if you will, to the Rover itself. Yeah,
exactly. It's exactly. I think we all have those stories too. Dixon, you have one of those, don't you? Didn't you have a spiritual calling?
I've always liked the series, though. Never the modern ones.
But it's still the Land Rover calling, right?
It is. Yeah. It is.
Yeah. Someday we'll have to get the Dixon stories. We haven't. We need to have you on as a guest, Dixon, properly. True.
You mentioned, Eric, that you're going from posting to posting, but now with all of this zeal for off-roading and everything else, you with the Army, I presume?
So I'm with the Navy. I am a sailor, if you will. That's never been on a ship. So,
and it's okay. And you got this near the Great Lakes in Illinois. So you joined the Navy expecting to be on a ship on fresh water because you would never want to be anywhere near salt water with a Land Rover, I presume.
Unfortunately, I live on Whidbey Island, Washington now, so I'm surrounded by salt water.
Oh yeah.
She's doing all right. She's just a little salty all the time.
That must mean a lot of undercoating there on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's I try to go through it and really clean her out probably about once a week. The winter time is a lot worse just because our windstorms are pretty significant. And I live probably about 200 meters from the shore. So it's just that constant light brushing of the ocean. That's just, it rots everything. So it's good times.
Though at the same time, you're going to have a great familiarity with the vehicle, which will then go and help with its longevity.
Yes.
Because you're actually doing something with it as opposed to most people on the East Coast or something like that are in someplace like Western Pennsylvania and drive it around in the wintertime and wouldn't think about salt water.
Very true. Very true.
Experience tips to provide to others for cleaning the undercarriage of a Disco 3?
So basically what I do, and this is since I put the new suspension in, I just go to the car wash and I literally just crawl under it and then I just spray the hell out of it, and then try to get everything, all those like nooks and crannies. If I notice any like extra buildup of rust, I'll have a wire brush that I try to get that excess off. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. And it seems to be working so far. When the floor falls out, I'll let you know. But
well, let us know if the rear doors start to rot out, because then it's a real disco.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So you haven't invested in a power washer yet of your own?
Not yet. So I try to keep things pretty minimal because I move around a lot, but it's definitely coming soon. I have a couple big projects for the disco plan, so those will probably happen first before I get things that are smart to invest in.
What are those big projects? Since you brought it up.
So the big thing that's on the list. So I'm in Florida right now on a work trip, but I plan on getting that 48 liter extra fuel tank, auxiliary fuel tank. So I pulled the spare tire out of the bottom. I plan on getting the rear bumper with the carrier from Tactical 4x4 and throwing both of those in. Those are my first two projects. Like I said, I built the bed frame, so the interior is pretty much the way I like it, and then probably the way I'm going to keep it for a while. I might do a couple more things just for comfort based, might get a different mattress pad for the inside. And at some point, I am going to do a front bumper and throw a winch and everything on, but we'll get there when we get there.
Sounds like a great additions to the vehicle. So you would make it more of an off-roader, overlander kind of setup?
It's definitely going for that longer range. And the thing that I always the thing I've been doing with her in general is I want to have an overlanding vehicle that I can be out for a long time with, that has a lot of technical off-road capabilities. And like, there's still plenty of things that I encounter that I need to turn around on. But anytime when I'm going up into the Cascades to wheel or anything, she's more than capable doing the basic stuff and a little bit beyond. And that's all I ever need. I'm not into trying to drive on giant rocks or anything like that. There's no need for that. I just like going where the good views are and just kind of hanging out.
That's the nice thing about Land Rovers typically, is you can build them up to the point that you want them to. Mm-hmm. And then they're still, quite capable, even if you decide you don't want to upgrade the suspension or something along those lines.
Absolutely.
Well, it's an accessory for the photography. It will get you to where all the good photos are going to be.
Absolutely. And it's definitely, she has brought me there, not minus the 90% of my photos are of my Rover, but she does help getting to everything else.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Yeah. I guess in the photos, it does have that kind of gray color. I did thought it was just gray, but if you say it's gray green, well, there you go.
Yeah, like I said, a little colorblind, so don't quote me on that.
Were the side graphics, did you put those on, or was that already there?
Yep, I bought those and put them on myself. I was looking to make it a little bit more unique to me, and that was how that happened.
So what about a possible roof rack? Do you want to put a RTT on there, rooftop tent, anything along those lines?
No, I think I'm going to avoid the roof rack as long as possible. And I'll tell you, the bed that I have in the back now, it is convenient because I don't really carpool that much anyway. But it was the day I realized on this most recent trip that the bed frame was a good thing in the back. It was hailing in Western Washington. I was like, definitely not trying to take some hail to the head right now. So just crawled in from the back seat back into the bed, put all the window shades up and everything. Boom, without getting wet or hit or anything, already set up, good to go. Nice. You let her idle for a little bit more to keep that heat going. But then after it's going for a little bit, it stays warm the rest of the night. And it's you can fit, I have a full size mattress pad back there, and it's about the same size as a full size bed. So it's comfortable. I'm not going to lie. It's a good spot to be.
No, that was the nice thing about the Disco, the threes, that they were completely lie flat. On the seating, which had never happened before. And that was a great improvement in discoveries. You said you put a riser in there then and then put the bed on. So you have like under storage underneath.
Yep. So basically how that worked is I wasn't originally going to pull all the seats because I wanted the general idea of, hey, if I had put anybody in the car, and then I could just pull the bed frame out quick. But after the first iteration and the poor measurements on my part, I decided that, I'm just going to take all the seats out and see what that does. Because I was trying to fit a cooler in behind the driver's seat, and it just was not working with the seat still there. So I pulled out all the seats and then just I raised it about 10 inches going all the way across right to the front two seats. and then plenty of storage where the second row would normally be. And that little divot from the third row seats being out is just enough for all your recovery stuff and a couple totes. So plenty of room for everything. Definitely worked out.
And what about cooking and supplies? Are you a cook, or at least take some of that equipment with you?
Yep. So I bring a jet boil and I have a general camp stove. I get a lot of my camping eating habits from my backpacking and climbing days, more so of I usually do this concoction of fresh vegetables, buffalo tuna, and then ramen. And I put that together quick, simple, nothing too bad for breakfast. I'll buy some of those generic camping meals, but it's still pretty decent overall. I don't go high and to the right with it by any means.
I recommend those oatmeal cups.
Okay.
Because you can boil the water in your jet boil and add a little bit of water, and you now have oatmeal, which good camping breakfast source of energy throughout the day. As they talk about oats,
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Although if you've seen me, I have plenty of energy already stored up.
Don't worry, COVID has helped me with that as well. It's been a fun year of doing a lot of nothings.
Yeah, it's a good way to store up for the forthcoming Roaring 20s.
Exactly. Agreed.
Yeah, store up all that energy so that when the Roaring 20s kick in, you have an important thing to me. Since you do have take a cooler with you, or I guess a refrigerator, beer.
Oh, absolutely. So also I live in the PNW now, so I take it to the next level with the hipster beer.
We call that craft beer, sir.
It's okay.
Craft beer. Beer
I'm still
with
from
flavor.
Lancaster. It's still hipster beer to me, unless it's Yingling or anything from Trogs. It's all hipster beer.
Trogs is in the craft beer area, but
it definitely is. But
I like beer with flavor. So
yes, agreed.
Yes. Do you have a favorite style and flavor?
So I usually go for the IPA variety, but right now I've been on a very, very big Pilsner and Kolsch kick.
Okay.
And it's been really nice. There's a surprising amount of breweries that go and do something different than just like the American style lager and doing the light things. They've been doing, the places I've been going have been doing Kolsch and Pilsners really well, which I've been pleasantly surprised with.
Probably already would be aware if you get to the Southwestern Pennsylvania, I'll take you to some fantastic breweries in the area.
Yeah.
Fantastic beers.
It's been a while since I've been in that area. So yes. I know you guys' event is coming up. What's 16 or 17 months out at this point?
Yes, you're correct. Yes, you're on the countdown. That's right. Yeah, you need to make it to the Vintage Grand Prix for Land Rover's 75th anniversary. Yes, come on out if you can. That'd be great. It'd be nice to have a disco as part of that.
Yeah, we'll definitely be out for that. As of right now, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be able to attend, but
unless you're stationed in the Philippines or wherever we don't have a base in the Philippines anymore. Sorry.
Nope. Yeah. She's closed down.
So you're going to wait in terms of projects on the front of the vehicle, but it sounds like from having to leave the vehicle on, that have you thought of something like one of those Labasco style heaters or whatever to put in it, so you don't need to run the engine?
I've thought about that a few times. I just don't know exactly. It's more so me not feeling 100% comfortable with keeping a non-electric heating source on while I go to sleep.
Yes. With a more hermetically sealed Land Rover than there's ever been before.
Yeah. As much as I like inhaling gasoline, it's not.
I'll get a diesel one.
Yeah, it's much better. Absolutely. So I've definitely thought about that. We're going to see. I am also Cascadia 4x4 is being very kind and providing me with a solar panel here soon that goes on the hood of the Disco. And we're going to see how that works out in terms of being able to run things while we, instead of keeping the true engine on.
That's a good idea. And you should you're going to get a second battery?
Yes, absolutely.
That's the next. I have that in my 110. I do have a solar panel on the roof right above the passenger cabin, and that feeds a second battery, keeps that charged and topped up, and then I'll use that to charge things. Or sometimes when I'm camping, I use that with my CPAP. Because I have to use one of those. And then you can also, there's a lot of companies that have portable batteries. That could be another interim solution too, where you then you could take solar panels and deploy them as you need them. They have ones that roll up and fold up, and then you could have your solar charging battery with you, then put that in the vehicle as needed.
Absolutely.
That may be a solution for you. And then you could get an electric heater if
also very true.
Yes. Always electrics are always helpful. Actually, a suggestion for you I was thinking of is, have you thought of getting an awning to extend maybe over the rear to give yourself some extra room and place to sit outside, maybe if the weather's not so bad, or if you want to leave the door open.
That's definitely also on the list, and probably the only thing that is going to go onto the roof at any time soon. Some of and when we get really into talking about the trail, the big thing I noticed in the desert in the summertime is that it's very sunny and hot. Not that I haven't learned that in the past 10 years of my life anyway, but it would have been nice to have a little bit of shade.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's a number of different kind of awnings out there too. You may just need one to go over the rear of the vehicle, which is not too bad. And probably still need a roof rack though to fix it. Well, why don't we talk about your trip? So tell us about the nature of the vehicle as it was, and what trip you took, and what was the impetus for the trip, and how was the Disco 3 outfitted before you took off?
Sure. Yeah. So once again, I bought Land Rover. I bought her for $3,500, and she was in Wisconsin. And then when I was getting ready to leave Illinois, I knew I wanted to go on some sort of trip like I did when I commuted out west originally, but I had a little bit more capability, and I definitely knew I wanted to push it a little bit, and I definitely wanted to try to be in austere conditions more than what I had originally done. And then the first inkling I got for the TAT, I was in the Chicago REI, and I was picking up a water drug because I was going to start playing with configurations. And then the guy I recommended, he's like, have you ever heard of the Transamerica Trail? And I was like, no, what's that? He went ahead and explained it to me. So if you do it coast to coast, it's about 5,000 miles of mostly off-road from Cape Hatteras to Port Orford, Oregon. And then Sam, the creator, has a full loop around the U.S. now that starts in West Virginia, goes around the Midwest. Then he has something called the Shadow of the Rockies, which goes up and down the Rockies. And then he has the two spurs for the Atlantic and the Pacific. And then I subscribed to the Patreon for this lovely podcast. And I was talking to you originally, John, and you mentioned something along those lines of the TAT, if I remember correctly. And that's when I really looked into it. I was like, oh, that's two people within a week. I should probably look into this a little bit more. And I was just reading through on what it was. I was like, oh, absolutely. This is 100% what I want to do. So that's kind of how that's how I decided I wanted to do that.
And that's mostly off-road, and I believe that's also what Oxford, when David Short drove Oxford back from the West Coast, that was the general trail that they followed for a good part of that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And so, the last people to really do it in a Rover and publicize, Jay Leno and his crew did it in the Disco 4 when they came out, and they did it coast to coast, and they seemed to have a really good time.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. That's right. There was a Land Rover took Disco 4s, and they went across the country. That's right. That was wasn't that the first time motorized vehicles, four-wheel motorized vehicles had done it?
Yeah, that really opened up the idea that a 4x4 could do it. And then I was watching that video, and I was just like, well, they're in mostly stock Discos. The only thing that they have is a raised air intake in that front winch. And I was just like, I'm really not good at off-roading, so I'm not going to put myself in any positions to really need winched. And if it looks sketchy, I'll just turn around. It's not that big of a deal. So that's pretty much at that point. 1st of May is when I took off. I went from where we were staying in Wisconsin to South Dakota. I did some backpacking in the Black Hills for a couple days, just kind of explored. I did the Needles Highway and just tried to check out those scenic byways. From there, I turned around, went back through the Midwest and stopped in Maryland. I was an Olympic weightlifter back in the day, so I ended up spending a couple weeks with my coach. And then I dropped Lottie off at Mid-Atlantic Rovers in Columbia, Maryland, to just do the once over, do all the things that I couldn't do, like the transmission fluid and filter change, because I couldn't figure that out. I was having a hell of a time getting the serpentine belt off when I was trying to do it, so had them do it. Then I had them put the raised air intake on. And then from there, I took off and I went up to Maine for a few days, went to Portland, Maine, and bounced around the White Mountains. And then from there, went right down to Cape Hatteras, did Ocracoke Island, and that's when I took off from the true east to west portion.
When did that start?
So I left Wisconsin on May 1st. I started the east to west on June 6th.
And how long did it take you?
86 days. So I finished July 14th or 15th.
Okay.
As a whole. So I was a little far behind, but it was still a good trip.
What do you mean far behind?
When you're doing the TAT and when you're setting up, the website recommends, and now mind you, this is for dual sport bikes. They recommend that you'll get about 250 miles a day. And I had not
on off-road conditions.
Yes.
Non-paved. Wow. That seems a lot.
Yeah. It turns out that's a lot.
Yeah, that seems a lot.
When I was crossing in and I was starting to get to the first dirt of North Carolina and Virginia, you're starting to get into Appalachia a little bit. And then this rainstorm just started hounding me out of nowhere. So going up and down the Blue Ridge, I had all these giant switchbacky hills with nothing but I was just sliding on mud, and it was such a great time. So I was getting a little less than 100 miles a day and 12 to 14 hours of driving. And so that kind of put me back about a week. So it took me what probably would have taken 7 days to get out of the Appalachians. It took me 12 or 13 to get out initially. And then pretty much smooth sailing until I in Western Tennessee. And that's when my airbag suspension for the first time had a catastrophic failure. So what had happened was I got a flat and instead of removing the fuse for the auto leveling sensor, because once again, I'm not super mechanically inclined. I didn't understand that was real at that point in time. I changed my tire and then she did not like that.
Okay.
And then, so I started drooping on the driver's side. I ended up breaking down officially, got the red suspension fault, dropped down into safety mode, and Sam Carrera, the creator of the trailer's front yard. So waited about 2.5 days for a tow, got down to Oxford, Mississippi. They repaired the compressor and replaced all the hoses, and everything was all fine and dandy. And then I started getting a suspension fault again while I was going over Ophir Pass in Colorado. And that's when the compressor died and everything. So I limped to Salt Lake City to GBR Rovers. And that's when I officially replaced the suspension.
2 compressors failed?
Not 2 compressors. I knocked all the hoses loose, and something about the powering system is what failed the first time. Okay. And then the compressor itself failed the second time.
Okay. It sounded like you'd replace the compressor the first time and then replace the compressor a second time, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Okay. I would have been significantly more sad about the situation if I had done that twice.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Well, what's this with removing the fuse? How does that impact all this? I'm not familiar.
So I had no idea this existed. So apparently it's every time with the airbag suspension, when you turn the vehicle off, it auto levels itself no matter what. Okay. Right. So there is a fuse for that. And if you go and change your tire, and as you're jacking the vehicle up, the car is naturally, even when it's off, going to try to auto level itself because it feels like something's off. And this is the way it was explained to me. And from there, it's going to keep trying and trying to correct it. And it's not going to be working. And eventually it's just going to let all the air out and force a fault on itself to protect the system. Changing
one spare tire does that?
Yes. At least that was my personal experience.
It seems like a design problem there. Like you think they would have big red bold letters in the manual or something. Cause that doesn't seem.
Well, I'm also an American in the military. I don't read manuals. I guess everything. Let's be real.
All right. Fair enough.
So I'm sure it does say that, but Yeah.
Right. If you change the spare tire and it's of a different size, I mean, it makes sense intuitively that if it's a different size tire and maybe even, a few pounds off on the PSI, it's different radius, right? Then it's going to start doing that, trying to find level and not going to find it.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was an interesting experience, and definitely like hindsight's 2020, like should have saw that coming, but wasn't thinking about it at the time.
Well, yeah. And your tires, your tires failed and you want to get back going again.
Yeah. Like I said, the second time I wasn't super in love with the airbag suspension anyway. I didn't like the idea that I could only go 30 miles an hour when it was raised up like that. That was also very, very irritating. So the second they said the compressor was gone, it's like, nope, I'm going to do this anyway. Might as well do it now.
So you went full coils.
Yep. Full coils. I'm a converter.
Good. Do you like that now? It sounds like it.
I do. I really do enjoy it. It's the peace of mind thing, especially. It's my gas mileage really didn't suffer too much. And then when a lot of people, when they're talking about going to coils, at least what I found is they're really worried about the quality of the ride. And with the old man emu coils, like I noticed a little bit of a difference, but it's definitely not significant enough for me that would dissuade me in the future from doing it again.
And you said it didn't impact your miles per hour.
No, my odometer is just, or my speedometer is just a little off, but other than that,
that's why I have my GPS all the time when I'm in my vehicles. It's just, I don't even barely look at the speedometer. It's bouncing around.
For sure.
So you said it took you 86 days to go from basically coast to coast. And this was mainly, I guess, a picture taking activity in addition to just, you wanted to do it to say that you've done it. Yeah.
So I started getting into photography mid-trail, I guess you could say. Like I definitely wanted to document it. And if you've been following me on Instagram, you probably noticed that I do all my updates in English, French, and German. So that's one of the ways I stay consistent with speaking different languages. And I was just like, oh, well, if I really try to document this more, it's just good practice for me. So I was just doing it for myself at first, and the Land Rover community seemed pretty great. So might as well do it, documenting it across, and it seemed to work out, and it's been good times.
Do you have a couple favorite places that you took pictures, or maybe you had an interesting adventure to get to a picture taking location?
So my first really, really great photo opportunity / point in the trail was Potts Mountain, I think it's called, in Virginia. And it was typically one of those things. I was going all around switchbacks. I was sliding up and down. Like I had gotten to the peak of the mountain right as this, like the twilight was starting to poke through, and all you see is like they
call that magic hour, right?
The golden hour.
Golden hour. Thank you.
So all I see was all of these clouds resting in the valley, and it was super foggy, and my headlights were just poking through in like just the right way. I was like, ooh, this is it. This is the one.
Nice.
So that was definitely the first one. That's probably one of my more memorable points in the Blue Ridge and in Virginia and the East Coast portion as a whole.
We'll have a link in the show notes and we'll talk about it several times. But for those who are listening right now, your Instagram account is?
It is at wandering_Lottie, LOTTIE.
And of course, as I said, we'll link in the show notes, but as if you're listening to the show at the moment, and you're like, oh, what is that Instagram account? I want to follow it. Yeah, you should. I highly recommend it. Great photos. And I need to go back and look for that photo you talked about, because I don't remember.
Absolutely.
That one, but
I'll send it to you after we're done recording here. Cause it's probably one of the earlier ones in the trail, probably. Cause I think I did weekly updates, or if not, I try to do an update twice a week. So it's definitely in the earlier section of those.
So from a practical side of things, you drove across the United States on this trail. From someone wanting to go and duplicate it, you really didn't you modified the LR3, the Disco 3, in the sense that you added a snorkel to it, though you don't have a winch. Mm-hmm. Did you actually need the snorkel?
I only needed the snorkel. I can't say I definitely needed it, but there was one time that I was definitely glad that I had it. There was a crossing in Tennessee. It was called Hurricane Creek. Just with, like I said, with all that washout and all that rain, it was just deep enough where, like, if I didn't have it, I definitely would have turned around. But I walked it, put the measurement in. I was like, no, totally fine. I can make it through. The current was barely moving at all. So glad I had it. Would you really need it if the weather's been good? No, not at all. You could really do it in a stock Rover of just about anything, and you would be totally fine. There's a couple points where you would definitely have to reevaluate. There's one point in the Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina that's super muddy, and I didn't go through that because I didn't have a winch. And there's a Facebook group for 4x4s that do it, and somebody posted a few days prior that it was just completely muddy and not worth even trying. And then I didn't get into any situations in Colorado where I would have really needed it. It's just a lot of technical rock driving in Colorado. Same thing with Utah. I just dodged a rainstorm through Mississippi, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So probably would have been a little bit more of a sketchy place, probably would have gotten stuck a lot more. But the only time I got stuck on the entire trail was when I got to the Oregon Dunes. And there turns out the Oregon Dunes are actual dunes, just in case you never got that by the name.
Important safety tip.
Yeah. So I was looking at this dune, and like, once again, I walked it first and I was like, oh, this is pretty compact. I'll definitely be able to get up. So next thing you know, I was coming over the edge, just quite didn't have enough speed, just laid flat on top. And it took me a couple hours to dig myself out. But other than that, I didn't get stuck at all. That was last 100 meters of the trail is when I got stuck. So naturally, that's what needed to happen.
You had to have something to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only time. If you have a shovel, a saw, an axe, and some traction boards, that'll get you through just about every obstacle that I at least saw on the TAT while I was on it.
Do you have traction boards, or do you now
I
have
do.
traction boards?
No, I had traction boards at the time and I hadn't used them yet. And I was like, man, I bought these for nothing. And then lo and behold.
And you can see the ocean. You're like, darn, now I have to pull them out. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And it was hilarious because like I said, I was right there and I revved a couple times to try to get out of it. And then I just saw in my rear view mirror, the tire spinning. I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. This is going to be a minute. Okay, here we go.
Doesn't the D3 have terrain response? And I take it that sand didn't help.
No, it does. And it does have a quote sand mode, unquote. And it definitely did its job. Just poor judgment on my part is what got me stuck.
Driver error.
Oh, absolutely. Thought
I've been having, and maybe our listeners probably have too during all this. You traveled alone
for the most part,
and that's not usually recommended.
Yeah. So, and that's one of those things. With my military career, and I'm not like a super badass or anything. Like I'm pretty average, and I'm a very, very administrative medical person. But I've had an opportunity to go to a lot of schools with like outdoor survival, and I'm pretty experienced in the outdoors. For me, I don't let my hubris get involved. So if I see something and I try to approach it logically, and it's like, okay, realistically, is this a situation that I could put myself into that I don't want to be in? And if I say yes, then I just turn around. It's not that, to me, it's not that big of a deal. Right. And that's always how I've approached the outdoors. I have a Garmin InReach. So if anything were to happen, I press the SOS button. And if anybody does anything in the outdoors as a whole, I highly recommend they get some sort of SOS beacon just in case, because you never do know what's going to happen. And it's just having that backup is there. Anytime when I'm driving as a whole, I usually keep extra blankets, the extra 3 days worth of rations and water. And I've always set myself up for success to be alone. And like, once again, if it starts giving me bad vibes, I'll usually just turn around and reroute. And it doesn't bother me any. And I did that plenty of times on the trail. Mississippi is when I started getting a partner. So somebody had posted in the forum that their partner was bailing and they were still about 2 or 3 days behind me. And this is when I was getting the suspension worked on for the first time. And I messaged him, I was like, hey, if you want to join me, this is my plan. These are my planned breaks throughout the rest of the trail, but this is what I'm doing. And then he said, sure, drove out, met me in Mississippi. We kind of talked to feel each other out. And from there, that's pretty much who I did the rest of the trail with. And then we had every once in a while, somebody tagged along behind us, but for the most part, I did the whole second half of it with somebody that was in a 4Runner.
So how busy is the trail?
I wouldn't qualify it as busy, but there's definitely people there. The true east to west drivers, and even when I was talking to Sam, he implied that there really wasn't a whole lot of people that did the east to west, like unpartitioned very often. But the eastern sections, I ran into plenty of people that were just doing like 2 or 3 days on it. And you'll see a lot of dual sport people more than you see other 4x4 people. I think I ran into less than 5 other 4x4 people my entire time on the trail.
Oh, wow.
That was doing the TAT, not just kind of off-roading and doing whatever. But for the most part, you'll see a lot of dual sport riders because that's how it was originally designed.
I see. Is it a double wide trail?
No,
Okay.
It is in some points,
Yeah.
But it's mostly, it depends on where you're at. So when you're going through, every time I was going through a mountain range, it was pretty much one lane and you had to yield to each other and everything like that. But the flatter portions, I would say double wide, sometimes even a little bit bigger. It just depends on where you're at. But as long as you know the rules, the trail etiquette for the most part, you should always be fine. It's nothing too crazy.
And the west to east traffic, did you have to do a lot of yielding or did you see a lot of vehicles coming the opposite direction?
Almost never. The only time I saw, no. And and I also started pretty early in the year. So a lot of the Colorado passes were still closed.
Okay.
So and even on Ophir Pass, like I had done it like just after sunrise and like you could see the people starting to trickle in as I was finishing it. So there's definitely traffic there at some point, but I think just in the way I chose to do things and I started like right at dawn every morning. And then around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I would start trying to look for somewhere to sleep for the night as far as campgrounds go. And then from there, I try to be like definitively camp built, dinner ate by no later than 7 p.m. every night. So I would be going to sleep right at dusk and rinse and repeat pretty much.
So what are accommodations like? Can you sleep right on the trail, or let's say right off of it? Are there campgrounds nearby? Or what about cleanliness and maybe getting fresh water?
A majority of the trail goes through national forest land, so you can camp for pretty much at any of the dispersed camping sites through the national forest for 14 to 21 days for free for the most part. But on top of that, there's plenty of established campgrounds along the way. Sam, if you buy his GPS tracks, which I highly recommend, he has all of the gas stops physically on the route and all potential hotels that you could stop at predetermined. So I would just go through that and I would zoom in on the trail and look to see if there was any dispersed sites along the way. So I have a Garmin Overlander, so I would use that. But I also, as a backup, because I'm a big 2 is 1, 1 is none type person, I would use Onyx Off-Road.
You are in the military, aren't you?
Unfortunately, yeah. Like there's some things, and I try to hide it, but sometimes it just comes out.
It serves you well, sir. It serves you well.
I appreciate it. It's so I would use that. I was like, oh, cool. Well, there's a dispersed site right here. Or if Sam,
I'm sorry, what's a dispersed site? Is that a military term?
No. So that is a camping term. So dispersed camping is basically there's no amenities to the site itself. Like it won't have a bathroom or a pit toilet or anything.
It's like primitive camping.
Yes. Okay. Essentially that's what a dispersed spot is. Okay. And then the Forest Service doesn't maintain it. It's just there. And like I said, for 14 to 21 days in most national forests, you can stay there for free. And that's pretty much what I did. I tried to stop probably about anywhere between every 6 and 8 days to stop, sleep in a hotel room and grab a shower and everything. There was a couple, obviously the suspension issues threw a wrench in that. And then I was also in the first couple of weeks of the trail, I was still finishing out my semester in school. So I stopped for a couple of days on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. I stayed at a nice fancy resort for a few days to hammer out finals and everything. So it was a good time.
The trail that's unimproved or is a trail not paved, is that mostly gravel or is it dirt?
It's mostly gravel and dirt. That's what you're going to see for the most part, especially in the eastern portions, because they're all reasonably maintained Forest Service roads. But moving on, as you start to get into the western portion, Mississippi and Arkansas will be a lot of, minus when you're driving through the Ozarks, will be a lot of dirt farming roads. And then that's pretty much all of Oklahoma. And when you start getting west, that's when you start seeing the varied terrains, because that's when it stops being like maintained logging roads to just, this road happens to exist.
It only exists as a GPS coordinate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Is it well marked? It sounds like it's not, or maybe the East Coast is well marked.
No, it once again, yeah, it also depends on where you are. Once again, if you decide to do it, especially whether it's section or you decide to do the whole thing, get Sam's GPS tracks, because you could upload it into any reasonable GPS or directly into your phone. And literally what I did is I just followed the blue line that went from coast to coast the entire time. I made a couple of wrong turns and you'll have to do a little bit of zooming here and there. And then there's a couple closures, but Sam's really, really good at, if you email him. And for an example, when I was driving through Utah, there was a bridge that looked to be out for at least 3 or 4 years. Send him an email, send him the GPS coordinates. And then if you get the updated map now, it'll have a natural reroute around it. So he's really good with maintaining it, and they're always generally up to date.
So important to me, does he list breweries along the way?
So he will list a couple tourist attractions and then a couple things. So Sam is not much of a beer guy. He's more of a bourbon guy. Okay. So there's a couple distilleries that he marked along the way. The trail pretty much goes right in front of Devil's Backbone in Virginia, which was an awesome campus. I camped there for a night. It was a good time. And then plenty of breweries going as you move along. The beer scene in Oklahoma was kind of below average, as it was in Mississippi. Not super impressed, but everywhere else, there was at least one brewery that I stopped in and had a really good time.
This is good to hear. Yes. I think you're now I think have given me the impetus to do this. It may not be in the next year or two, but I think I'd definitely like to do the trail now. And I think you're giving me a good overview. So things that are important to me would be, good beer along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would highly recommend anybody does it. It's definitely, even if it's only sectioned, you don't have to do east to west. I had a really great time going east to west, but there's plenty of stops. There's plenty of things to do and things to see. Just in the Virginia section, you can spend a good week in the Virginia section. You're going to go to the Appomattox State Forest. You're going to see all those historical sites. It goes through all the different battlefields, and you're in that upper region of the Appalachians where you border West Virginia. A bunch of beautiful sites, bunch of stuff to do. It's definitely worth doing, even a one state section.
And you're only an hour away from Pittsburgh when you're in the northern part of West Virginia.
Yeah, because you have that little 8-minute section of not even 8 minute, that 2-minute section of Maryland, yes. and then you're back to West Virginia again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go. Yep. I'm familiar with it. Yeah. That's near Cumberland and all that. Yeah. That's about an hour away from me. Yeah.
So definitely worth it. Not too far away.
What most interests me, it's good to hear that you can jump on and off the trail and so on. In terms of how would you describe someone like me taking a series vehicle on it, which isn't going to have all your fancy traction control and all the rest of this stuff? How is the trail in more primitive vehicles?
I think you would do fine. Like I said, especially in the East Coast portions, everything's pretty well maintained. And I don't see any reason that there would be an issue unless you are having overheating problems going uphill, and that happens pretty consistently for you because you're going to do a lot of up and downhill, a lot of switchbacks. And then for the Midwest portion, it's just flat, pretty simple, definitely easy. Where I would start,
except for that big mountain range.
Yeah, well, that's like I said, except when we start creeping into those Rockies, that's when things get pretty interesting. Those big passes and everything are definitely going to be challenging. And then as you get into Utah and you get into the Ruby Range and everything, and along Moab, there's definitely going to be a lot of interesting portions of that for you as well. But then after you clear Idaho and you get at least halfway through the Cascades in Oregon, it's pretty much home free again.
Okay. Interesting.
How close are the amenities, specifically I'm thinking of gasoline stations and also auto parts stores? Are they say within a mile, 10 miles? Do you have a sense of that?
So like I said, Sam has it predetermined for you to go into towns and get gas and have gas stops. If you're only doing 100 miles a day, you're going to hit a town at least one time. The only times I really didn't hit a town at least once a day, while I was going through Potts Mountain and all that part of Virginia and eventually emptied out, I think I was by myself for 2 days at that point. And then Colorado, I went a day or two without seeing anybody. But other than that, it's going to bring you right through. It's a lot of small towns, so don't necessarily expect to have all of the auto parts, but generally speaking, somewhere along the trail will be something like an Advanced Auto or a Napa or something. So it's definitely there.
Your basic auto supplies then.
Yep. And the infrastructure's there. So it's not too much to worry about. And like I said, that's why Sam did all the guesswork already. He spent 25 years putting this trail together. He knows where all the stops are, and he makes it the most convenient for the individual doing it.
And what's cellular coverage like along the trail?
0 for the most part.
Oh, okay. That's actually surprising. Yeah, I thought there would be more.
So I did not have cell service a majority of the time I was there. I was on the trail. You would get into that town and you'd have a bar, but there's towns you'll go to where you pull into the gas station and it looks like you're back in 1970 because it's cash only. And then you got to go and you got to knock on the door and ring the bell 90 times for the person to come out. And that's when they turns the pump on for you. So those places do exist along the trail.
That's actually another good tip. So you're saying take lots of cash with you because credit
Absolutely.
card may not the easiest thing to do.
Absolutely. 100% recommend that.
I hadn't thought of that until you just came up as part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think a lot of people forget that rural America in some places is very, very rural still.
It's called rural for a reason.
Yeah. And you'll go to those places and it really is cash only. It's like you're taking a step back in time. It's nothing but old vehicles. It'll be that old gas station / general store / everything you need all in one, because it's the one store in a 30-mile radius. And it's, and those are interesting places, and it's not something you get to see every day. And there's still plenty of Americans that are still living like that and are doing just fine. They might have issues here and there, but that's a legitimate part that you can still see and something you can still experience in the United States, which I think is super interesting.
So I guess the majority of the trail then is on unimproved roads and in, say, rural America, where, you need to go probably several miles off the trail to get to what we would consider more civilization, I take it.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take you some time.
Yeah.
If you decide to break trail in not a portion that goes adjacent to a city anyway, you're gonna be hiking for a little while.
Okay.
To try to get off and try to get to like a more developed place.
So it's not the best trail for if you're trying to sightsee America and hit all the major points in the country. This is not the trail for you.
I would say yes and no. If you're trying to see, and the trail does go through several the big things. You're going to see like the highlights of the Appalachians. You're going to see the highlights of the Ozarks. You're going to see a lot of the highlights of the Rockies going through Colorado. And then of course you're going to get like Moab and a lot of those highlights as well. If you're not trying to go to those things and you're trying to do something different, then I would say maybe look into something different or look into sections of it instead, because it's definitely not for everybody. And if you want to encompass more time to see more, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing the TAT, because consistently you're going to be going 30 miles an hour or less the entire time. And it's just going to take a while.
And the locals know what the TAT is, and they understand people are traveling through?
Yes. And there will be, once again, on Sam's GPS routes, if there's a particular section where they want you to be extra careful, he marks that. A lot of places will have signs that say, oh, TAT riders stop here. They'll offer supplies and things like that. It's pretty, at least in my experience, it's very welcomed by the communities it goes through, because in a sense, that's their only tourism that they get.
Right.
And there's this one restaurant in Waterloo, Alabama, that's literally in a prison that they just cook food out of, in like an old 1-cell prison. And nobody goes to Waterloo, Alabama, but it was a fantastic restaurant.
Made by inmates?
No, unfortunately not. So it's their big claim to fame. Claim to fame is that Jesse James had a brief stint in that particular prison.
Okay.
And then, it's an interesting little place. Everything's still there. The only difference is the sheriff's office now is a kitchen, and it's a cool spot.
I do have to correct you on one thing. Pittsburgh is part of the Appalachian Mountain Range area and is considered the Paris of Appalachia. So it's not on this trail, mister.
Fair enough. I mean, I've driven down that section of the turnpike quite a bit, so I personally feel like I could
yes. Well, that
bypass it.
Technically, the turnpike is perpendicular to the Appalachian Mountains, but
fair enough.
Yes. That sounds fantastic, Eric. So you're in the current issue of Land Rover Owners International, and I take it the story, which I haven't had a chance to read yet, but it talks about what you've just told us about in the issue and some of your photography.
Correct. It'll take you through the highlights of the trip, kind of like what we covered, just a little bit more details in a couple of the sections. And then, it's.
Did we get an exclusive? I hope we got an exclusive, something you didn't tell them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm kidding.
But so it's a good article. It came out well. The photos that we chose together ended up coming out. It's a cool article. Highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, I will certainly do that. I got to track it down, and it is in the February edition, 2022. Depending on when you're listening to this podcast, it may not be 2022 when you're listening, but February 2022 in the Land Rover Owners International. Look for that article. It looks like the title of that, according to their website, is USA Coast to Coast, an awesome Transamerica Trail adventure in a Discovery 3. So check out Land Rover Owner International. So what's coming up for you, Eric? Are you've gotten the Land Rover bug? Do you want to take other trips, or is maybe another Land Rover in the offing?
So there was probably going to be a Land Rover at some point, another one. Definitely of course, now I want a Defender, like something fierce. And I was briefly in Italy for work, and I almost bought like 6. But
Heritage.
logistically,
I take it Heritage version.
of course,
Yeah,
of course.
Hey, just checking. It's a question we now have to ask.
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, I just got done a trip where I did Whidbey Island, Washington, where I lived, to Key West and ended here on Pensacola. And then hopefully, if the timeline works out, I'm trying to do the Alaskan Highway in the next couple months. And I would drive back down. In theory, I'd go back down to Key West and do Key West to the Arctic Ocean. So if that can happen, it'll be a good time. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, you gotta keep us informed of that. Sounds like that'd be a really neat adventure. Yeah, absolutely. And then for this most recent trip, it'll be in probably the May or June issue of LRO. And if you want to get together again and talk about that, we can also do that at some point.
Excellent. And any other Land Rovers pique your interest?
So I'm really, really curious to see what this 130 is going to look like when they release a little bit more pictures. I've been following it for a little while now. It seems interesting. I think the new Defender gets a little bit worse of a rap than I think it should, but I've also haven't been a Land Rover aficionado for a very long time. But it's interesting. I'm very interested to see what the 130 is going to look like.
Do you like Range Rovers?
The Range Rover Classic seems pretty cool. I haven't really done a whole lot of looking into Range Rovers just from a price perspective, and it's still a little harder to find used as well.
Certainly in good shape at a good price. Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you hooked up with any clubs? And you're so PNW, for listeners who are not sure, is Pacific Northwest here in the United States. Have you hooked up with any clubs up in the Pacific Northwest going off-roading?
Not officially yet. I'm in the Facebook group for Washington Land Rovers, but I haven't really gotten out, just with work being pretty hectic and this trip coming up. Haven't gotten out yet. Going to try to probably get into the community here in Floribama a little bit. I want to try to get to the dates work out to get to that event in Santa Rosa. It's end of March, I think.
Yeah, I think they did move the date this year. Yeah, it's the 30A Sand Rover Rally.
Okay. Yes. So I want to try to get out to that, and if it happens, it happens. It'll be exciting.
Great. And final question: have you given your Land Rover a name? I should have asked this early on.
Oh, absolutely, Lottie.
That's of course. It's in the Instagram name, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I struggled with a name for quite some time, and then I didn't. So it just ended up I was going into town in Wisconsin, and then I Googled British female names, and then it's going through. I was like, oh, Lottie, I like it. Let's roll with it.
There you go. Erick, thanks very much for coming on the program, talking about the Transamerica Trail. And I recommend folks check out your Instagram, which is
at wandering_Lottie, LOTTIE.
There we go. We'll have a link, of course, in the show notes. We'll also have a link to the Transamerica Trail, which is transamtrail.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes, which includes, looking at it here, they have GPS tracks are multi-directional. I take it that's whether you're going west or east,
yes,
or east or west. And
correct,
then has maps of the different trails. Because not only is there, I think you mentioned this, there's the east to west, but there's also some spurs that come off of that trail that you can do. You can almost ring the US. I'm sure he's working on a
correct
ring here. Yeah.
The full ring should hopefully be out sometime this year.
I hope that ring includes Pittsburgh. I don't have to have a stern talking with this man.
I think you should. So I can tell you, based on how we were talking, it won't, unfortunately, because the upper Midwest portion is going to go through the upper peninsula of Michigan and hook back where the trail starts in West Virginia. So it'll be close, but no cigar.
You could make a little divergent change and come down 79. We got some trails we could.
Fair enough.
At least have a little spur there that comes off. Have the
for sure
the Pittsburgh spur.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Erick. Appreciate you coming on the program.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure to be here.
We hope you enjoyed show number 106. Thanks to Harold and Morgan. Thanks for coming on the program, as always, gentlemen.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
And also thanks to Erick Huertas for coming on and talking about the Transamerica Trail. I highly recommend you go out and check his Instagram account. He's a fantastic photographer. Check out the article in Land Rover Owners International also. And thanks to the One True Packs for his continued production support, helping us to sound better. If you see him in his disco in New York State. Give them a wave. In honor of Land Rover's 75th anniversary, you are invited to bring your Land Rover, especially Series and Defender owners, to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in 2023. That's July. You now have 17 months to prepare.
And if for some reason you don't get it running in time, show up anyway and bring pictures.
Visit our website, centresteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to stories discussed in today's podcast. If you're listening to the podcast on our website, you can also download a podcast app and subscribe so you have the show delivered automatically to you when it's available. We post a new podcast at the end of every month. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, and voicemail. You can directly support the show at patreon.com/centersteer. You can also buy us a t-shirt, sticker, or a tea/brown water. Click on store on the menu at the top of our webpage. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Click on voicemail on the website and let us know, or send us an email. Until next time, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast.
Thanks for listening. You may now resume your important things.
So that means that once it reaches 15 here, we have to stop the show.